Hi everybody. So it's October already. Can you believe it? I tell you, time does go by quickly. I feel a little out of sorts today, to be honest. I love my teacup. I am not a morning person. I think at one point I was, but over the years I've become less of a morning person. Today is October 1st, actually. And it's time for the October 2019 vlog for Stacy's Art Studio and Gardens. I hope you'll enjoy what I ramble on about today. It's a little bit weathery out today, as Pooh Bear would like to say. There's some weather coming in, so I'm in a little bit of pain today. I thought I would talk to you a little bit about different things. Today we'll start with art, of course. Health, schedules, gardens, and a little bit about chemicals. So sit down, have a cup of tea, and I hope you enjoy what I have to say. We'll see. Do my best. First, let's talk about art. So I started painting in oils this month. This is my very first painting that I did in oil, and it's already sold, which I think is really quite exciting. It's still tacky to the touch. It's like it's not too bad, but to wrap it up and ship it, I wouldn't do that. So it's got to cure a little bit longer before I can feel safe to package it and ship it. I have still been working on this painting. I've got the shape here done. I've had to redo some of the sky, so I'm going to go back, redo that some more. I've had such a good time working in oil. I might end up putting oil on this painting. I'm not sure. This other painting I worked on, I had done in acrylic at first. And then after I started working with the oil, I realized how much difference that it made, for me anyway. And so I've been bringing in oil on top of this acrylic, and in here I have more to do and more highlights to do. I do want the rain effect, but it was too strong, the first part of it. But that's kind of how I paint anyway. I kind of put in a strong thing and then I lighten it. Oils have been really fun to be working with. I've never worked with them before. I've always used, well, when I started painting, to be honest, I used house paint because I was doing big murals and I had the house paint on hand, so I just mixed my colors with house paint and house paint brushes, to be honest. And then from there I went to acrylic. And I've always done acrylic. I've had a lot of people tell me you should do oil. You should try oil, and I've always been resistant to that. There's a few reasons. Because it does take a long time to cure is one of them. I was a little concerned about the chemicals involved with oils, but I found some natural oils to clean the brushes with, so you don't have such a strong odor. Also, they have oils out now that are water soluble, and I haven't tried those yet. I wanted to go with the original oil just to work with it for a little bit to see, you know, how I worked with it. And now that I know that I really do like it, I am gonna try to invest in some of the water soluble oils and see how they work with. And you know, every artist has different ways of doing things, and for me this is just kind of that's my process. And I didn't really realize how lovely it would be to work with the oils the way that I paint. And I've actually really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad because I kind of hit a wall, and you do as an artist, just working with the acrylics, and I felt frustrated a little bit and trying to make them do what I wanted them to do. And I have these problems in my own head, such as depth perception, proportion. I have a lot of issues with that, and oil is very forgiving with that, so that you can work with it until it's in the right shape, size, and location. With acrylics, it's harder to do that. You know, if you have trouble with the proportion and you have to build on it or make it smaller or whatever, you've got to paint over it, and then that leaves a residue sometimes. So I have in the past been scraping paint off of my canvases, feeling a little frustrated because I have trouble with that. But with oil, you can change it. You have enough time, it's forgiving that way. So I've enjoyed that this month. September was much busier than I had thought it would be. So I'm greeting October feeling a little worn out. And of course, like I said, the weather coming in, the weathery, that affects me. So what I've accomplished in the gardens in September, not a whole lot in the back gardens. I have been cleaning up, kind of preparing for fall. I've taken down most of the sunflowers that have died and saved the seeds and put some out for the birds to eat. They've really enjoyed that. I loved watching that. The water fountain in the back has done really well, and I'm really pleased with that. In fact, last week I was sitting out in the morning and there was a little bird, a little songbird that flew down into the fountain to get itself a little drink, so that really made me happy. The hummingbirds there's fewer of them flying around at the moment, and everything, like the roses, have really blossomed. They've grown so much in this last month because they haven't been dealing with extreme heat in the last week and a half. You know, we have the extreme heat, but until then, and then the last week and a half, things have, you know, kind of cooled off. And also the extreme heat, when we did have it, was in shorter periods, and so you can see all the plants that have been struggling through the summer just really expand, and so that's been fun to watch. But I haven't done a whole lot in the backyard. I didn't get much done in the back gardens. And the secret garden, of course, is completed. I did put in clover seed there, and it is coming up like crazy. It's doing really well. So I'm really excited because I'm pretty sure that'll take over the grass by next year for sure. I put the clover seed in the backyard, and it's coming up a little bit harder, but it is coming up, and I'll probably need to reseed for it to get really thick in there, so I'll probably do that. And so that's exciting because it grows really well, and I'm looking forward to all the benefits of clover, such as it fertilizes the ground, so you don't have to add any kind of food to it, because the clover does that all by itself. It's a pretty amazing little plant, and it's resistant to the doggies, so I'm looking forward to having, you know, greener spaces in the backyard with the puppies. Now the front desert cottage garden did so much work in it, and the reason is because it's in the front yard, and it got to a point where you hit that middle stage where it's just a disaster and everything's torn up and it just looks awful. And so because it was in the front, I decided that we should probably put forth a lot more effort to try to get it to the point where it's at least, you know, presentable, which was quite a lot of work. My husband helped out a little bit with some moving of a few rocks for me. But I hauled all the gravel in myself, so I'm pretty worn out. But we've accomplished quite a lot in the front. I did simplify my plans. I think that's how it works in anything that I do, whether it's designing in the house or designing the garden or a painting. I have a picture in my head of what I want to accomplish, and then as I start going, I either realize it's too complicated or it needs something a little bit different, and that's kind of how I do that. So in the front, I had planned some raised beds, some arbors, a pergola, a bunch of stuff. And as I was working and I put those posts up along the sides of the house, I realized it really didn't need the pergolas or the arbors, and it really didn't need the raised beds. There's really just not enough room out there, and because I have decided to add some pretty large raised beds in the back gardens, I've decided not to in the front gardens, and that simplified things quite a lot. I'm not going to add a fence that I was going to add, but I accomplished, I feel, the look that I had wanted to. At least we can see the little beginnings of it. I can see the desert part of it. The cottage part is slowly building, and we'll get there. So I managed to get the rest of the fake turf torn up where it needed to be torn up. And the parts that I could plant things, I've planted grasses that are all drought tolerant. Everything needs a lot of attention in the beginning of its life. No matter what you do, it doesn't matter what you plant, it needs attention, and it needs water in that first year of its life. So right now it doesn't feel drought tolerant because I've been watering so much out in the front. But we're establishing, and things are doing pretty well. So anyway, those grasses are doing really well. Some of them have taken hold strong, some are still, kind of wobbly. And then I covered everything with a really pretty gray pebble gravel. And then I moved some of the river stone, and that river is the fake, rock river is still there. And I planted in the front the median between the sidewalk and the road. I got that cleaned up, and I put the little gray gravel over that, and then I planted the little miniature little miniature spruce trees, and they're just adorable. It looks like a miniature forest right now because it's got the big rocks and the little lights and the little tiny trees. And the rosemaries are actually going to be larger than the miniature spruce for a little while. And then the driveway, that was the biggest thing. The rock driveway, when we moved in, had about 3 to 4 inches of river rock on it, and that is not an effective driveway material because the rock, they're like that big, and it was above the sidewalk, so it just continually poured off because it's also sloped off into the sidewalk, into the road, and it's just really bothersome for the neighbors. And I got little kids that are riding bicycles up and down the sidewalks, and I don't want them to run into a little rock and get hurt. So over the last 3 years, I've been shoveling that rock out, moving it to different places, and now we got down to where the plastic was starting to stick out of the dirt, and so that was time to bring in some gravel. And I brought in the same thing, that light gray gravel, pea gravel, and it looks really good. And then I also built my firewood storage, and we planted 2 plum trees in the front, and we planted 2 Leland cypress. And I know you probably saw my brief video. We're going to be doing some finishing up work the end of this week, and so I think next week I'll be doing a video to show you what I have finished to the point through winter. I actually don't have any more building projects out in the front, so that makes me actually very happy. I still have the rain barrel to hook up, but we're coming into winter, and the rain barrel needs to be put away for winter anyway because it'll freeze, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm not going to worry about that till spring. I still have the brick project that I keep hinting about, and I'll either do, in the winter, depending on the temperatures of the winter, or I'll do in the spring. So it's really almost to the point of what I can call completion, and then it just needs maintenance. So I'm really pleased with that. I'm really tired, to be completely honest. But it is so satisfying to be out there and looking at it and how clean it looks and neat. And I've had quite a few neighbors have shown a lot of appreciation for it. I've had different ones drive up and say thank you, it looks really nice. And all the different neighbors that are in the area have really been pleased with the process. So that makes me feel really good. It's a nice representation of our home. It's not quite finished. When I get the brick done, then the cottageness will really shine through. And as the roses grow, the cottageness will also shine through. And then all the herbs that are out front too are just fabulous. And I plan on adding a few more herbs. I've got 3 rosemary plants growing. One is large enough I can take some harvest from it, and then I've got chives, and I don't mind that they spread. That makes me happy. I'm fine with that. You know, here where it's so dry and such tough growing environments, I don't mind things that spread easily because it's so hard for it to spread anyway. And I figure, you know, the worst thing that happens is you pull them out. I like that theory that Monty Don has: overplant, take stuff out, because that way you can really see the benefit. And when it gets, if it feels like it's just too much, pull a plant out. It's not the end of the world. And then I've also, the sage has grown quite a lot there, and I have lemon balm out there too. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, thyme. The thyme is doing pretty well. It's starting to turn into a little bit of a bush, so that makes me happy. So on my property I have rosemary, thyme, chives, sage, lemon balm, basil, lemon verbena, and plantain, which is considered a weed, but I use it as an herb. And I think that's mint and lavender. So we have a lot of herbs growing on the property, and herbs are really satisfying and really enjoyable to use in cooking and in body products, oils for the skin. Fabulous. So I'm really happy with that. Now the trees are doing really well. I don't have any that are looking sad, so that's really good. I'm happy about that. I did a little bit of cleanup on the desert sage. I took the branches that were hanging out on the bottom of it and cleaned that up, and same with the big peach tree out in the back. I took all the suckers off the bottom and lifted it so it looks kind of like a tree now instead of an overgrown bush. So that's good, and I'll wait to do the rest of the pruning in late winter. And then health issues. So the kiddo is doing actually pretty well. He has huge amounts of appointments still, and I really don't see an end to that. We are trying to limit the amount of tests that he has to go through. You know, he's an adult now, and it really just should not be his life. It should not be about non-stop tests. So we have a new plan with his oncologist as to how many. We look at it and decide, you know, just how important is that. For instance, right now there's a heart issue that really is not an issue, we don't think. But we have a new doctor in the mix, and he thinks he sees something different than all the other doctors have seen before. And he wanted some more extensive tests done, but after the other doctor who has seen it from the very beginning, the problem from the very beginning, feels that it's that's what it is. It doesn't need to be really pursued, but in a few months they'll do another echo. They'll take another look at it, and if there's any changes at that point, then we'll go ahead with any kind of serious testing that needs to be done. But if it looks the same, then it's really the same thing. And so we want to try to reduce the kind of anxiety and stress that causes him. You know, he needs to have some semblance of peace in his life, and having constant health threats is very difficult to live with, both for him and myself as well, since I'm his mommy. But so we're trying to focus on trying to give him a little more peace in his life, as I like to say. And you know, he still has a lot of appointments that are just upkeep, and he has to do that. And most of them are not super stressful, but he had his checkup with his oncologist, and things are looking better than last year. It's just still a lot going on. So, and of course, no cancer still, and so that's always a huge relief. And then I don't talk a whole lot about my own health, but I figure I might as well bring it up because you see that I stay really active. I work really hard on the gardens, but I have a process. I have I guess it's an immune illness, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, arthritis, a few of those kind of things. And to me, they're very minor compared to what my son goes through. So I don't talk about them a whole lot, but I kind of wanted to talk about the process of how I do things, because I know it kind of looks like that's all I do is work in the garden or build things, and that's not actually the case. I work really hard when I feel good. It's something that I learned, growing up in the home that I grew up in. We all worked very hard, particularly in summer and fall, because winters were very a big deal where we lived. So preparing for winter was absolutely essential. If you didn't do that, then you don't survive the winter. So, that's kind of how I grew up, to work really hard in kind of spurts. And I've actually used that as a benefit to me. So I believe with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and arthritis, that for me it's important to keep moving. And because I think the more you move, the longer you're able to move. I think also it's good for my stress levels. Move and rock is a really good way. It's kind of like how people run marathons. They do that for an emotional release sometimes. A lot of people I've known who've lost people, their children, to cancers or other health issues, they really, really get involved in the running and marathons and Ironman and bicycle riding, and I really, admire that and understand that. But because I have damage in a foot, I'm unable to run or do those kind of things. So I get the same release. Oh, I bumped the camera again, sorry. By working in the garden really hard, and that does help me a lot. I get bored to death going to like a gym and working out. That makes me just crazy. I've got to do something that I feel like is a benefit to everything in our lives, and when I'm on a treadmill or something, that drives me nuts. So I use that as my exercise, and but I can only do that when I'm feeling really well, and my health goes up and down throughout the month. My stamina and amount of rest that I need changes, and I really do pay as close attention to my body as I can for that. And there are some things that go on the back burner if I'm not feeling well. Cooking is probably the one thing that really gets put on the back burner the most. We may pick up more meals than we would like, but that's just how it is. But when I feel really good, I work really hard. And like today, I'm not feeling well. The weather is changing, and that pressure, when the pressure is changing, that causes me the most pain. And so that's when I slow down and sip a cup of tea and hang out with Molly, who gets really bored. She doesn't like that. Try to go sit outside with her son so she has something to do, chase lizards or something. And just take the break. And then tomorrow I should be better, and I'll be back at it again. And then, there are times taking the kiddo to appointments that I'm in quite a bit of pain, but I can manage to do that. It's just driving. It's not too bad. So that's kind of my health issues, and they, like I said, they're minor, but I kind of wanted to share that because I don't want to give the perception that I just charge at it and do it all the time, and because I think everyone has health issues. They have time restraints, they have family to care for, responsibilities, jobs. They have all these things that take up a lot of their time and energy, and my point is that you can still garden. You just have to find where your limits are, and enjoy what you have within those limits, And so that's why I always encourage, if you don't have a large space, get pots and grow a few things in pots, because it doesn't take a whole lot of strength and energy once you've got the pots filled with dirt and the plants to care for them. You just have to pay attention to watering them more than stuff that's in the ground. And then if you have a small patch, start with that and really enjoy the beauty that's there. And in New Mexico, of course, it's about structure. So those things are the hardest parts. And so, work at the structure a little at a time, kind of like I've done. I haven't gone and built all the structure all at once. I've done pieces of it, piece by piece. And it is slow. And, some things you get really tired of. It's not done yet. But it's also a great process to get it done. So anyway, that's my thought on health and gardening and working around different things like that. And then I thought I'd talk a little bit about chemicals. We do talk about that once in a while, and I know it's a little bit of a controversial issue with some, but it is the reality in our life. We have to be really cautious about chemicals, particularly, I know some people will say, well, everything's a chemical, and that is true. So what I'm talking about is synthetic chemicals and petrochemicals. When I was 15, my dad and I and my brother were traveling through the back roads from Colorado to the East Mountains, and we had some car problems, and it was very late at night. We were just outside of the Colorado border. We were coming into Ojo Caliente, New Mexico. And outside of there, our tire blew, and we replaced it, and then another tire blew, and then we didn't have another tire. By this time, I believe it was around midnight, 12:30, and so we had to drive on the rim. It's back, when we didn't have cell phones and things like that, so you just manage with what you've got. And we were, as we were going slowly, and it was cold. It was not quite winter, but it was cold. And my dad started to, I thought, fall asleep. So he fell forward, and then he sat up. And then he fell sideways, and then he sat up while he was driving. And then his hands fell off of the steering wheel, and he put his hands back up, and then he fell over again. And he sat up again, and he said to me, I don't know what's wrong. Dropped his hands again. This went on for a couple of minutes, and finally, excuse me, there's a fly in here. A couple of minutes, finally he said, you're going to have to drive. And I didn't even have a license at the time yet, but I did know how to drive. So my brother and I came over to the brake and was able to get the brake on. And then my brother and I were able to slide him over, and then I drove till we got to Ojo Caliente, which is, I don't know if you know about it, but it's at that time had, oh, there I go again. That time it had one hotel. I don't think anything else there other than the hot springs. I don't even think there was a gas station there at the time. And by that time he had completely passed out when we got to this little strip hotel, and we pulled in there, and my brother and I were able to carry him to the owner suite of the hotel. And by this time it was around 1 in the morning, and the owner, she didn't want to open the door because she thought he was drunk. So we were able to convince her that he was actually sick. Anyway, we got him into a room, and I called a friend, and he went and gathered my mother, and they drove out to Ojo Caliente to get us, and then they took him to a hospital. And what had happened is he had carbon monoxide poisoning. And for some reason, it didn't affect my brother and I, perhaps because we were younger. I don't know. If we'd been in the car any longer, we all probably would have died of carbon monoxide poisoning, because what had happened is there was fumes coming into the cab of the vehicle. And there wasn't a whole lot that the hospital could do for him. They did a few things, and he survived. But from that day on, he could no longer tolerate any kind of chemical that, but we didn't understand were petrochemicals. We did start to understand about formaldehydes that were in perfumes and fragrances and colognes and paint and cleaning products, but we didn't really understand petrochemicals that well. And of course, it was a very strange thing for someone to get sick from that sort of thing. And so, it was uncomfortable for me as a teenager to grow up with and around, because we didn't use the same things everybody else did in our culture. And so after I grew up and moved out, I didn't really stick with that. I went to all the chemicals, and then my son, came along, and life was normal. And then he got leukemia, and then he got over it. And then some years later, he started showing these signs where he'd be around people with fragrances and perfumes, and he'd start choking, and his face would turn red, and he'd get migraines, and he'd get hives. And I recognized all of that from living with my dad with his problems with chemicals. I really hate the term multiple chemical sensitivities. And I'm going to tell you why. And the reason I hate it is because it just sounds like it's bothering you. You're sensitive to it. And it really isn't that. It is making you very sick. And it's really hard for anyone to really understand it unless you've experienced it or are living with it. And because it affects each person a little bit differently. When I walk into a room with fragrances, I think, wow, that's a lot of fragrance. But it doesn't make me sick. But it makes my kid choke and get hives and migraines. And it affects. And certain chemicals affect certain people a little bit differently. Like some things some people can tolerate, but the other people can't. And it's becoming a little bit more common, and so it's a little bit more acknowledged. But my point is I'm not trying to make changes in the world or make anyone forcibly understand what it is. I just try in our own lives to keep our home petrochemical free. And so that's one of the reasons why I have struggled with trying to use oil paints, because I know the acrylic in the small amount in my studio does not bother my kiddo. And the oils, the traditional cleaning products would make him very sick. So I won't do that, of course. And also, I think our culture is really concerned about health issues according to what they eat. And I think that's reasonable. I understand that. However, there is so much stuff that is going into our clothes and our bodies and from all of these. Just the other day I saw an advertisement for toilet paper that has fragrance in it. To me, I just can't believe that. And, trash bags that have fragrance in it. So it makes my life a little challenging because I have to find ways to get around that. And in our home, that's why I do the videos on how I make my cleaning sprays, my lotions, my laundry detergents, and all of these things. And I'd like to always point out I am not selling a product, and and everything that I use, I'm not getting any paid thing for. I'm just trying to share that because I know that there are more people who are struggling with the same issues, and we just do our best that we can. I really don't think that there's a real perfect solution to any of this, but we just do the best that we can, and try to live our lives as normally as we can and enjoy it. So I just thought I would share the story about how I really learned a lot about chemical sensitivities. There was an allergist in South Carolina who saw my son, and I really liked how he put it. He called it an industrial allergy. And I really feel that is true because the products, the chemicals that are in these products are industrial products because they're made from petroleum. And so I think that's a better term, but I'm sure it'll go on as saying multiple chemical sensitivities, which, I accept. The reason I don't like it is why I explained. And so I just thought I'd share that a little bit with you today. I hope it benefits somebody out there. I hope you know that I'm not complaining. I think that our life is beautiful. I just like to share a little bit with the challenges and how we work around them. And maybe that'll help somebody else. And I hope you're all having a wonderful October. We look forward to the balloon fiesta here in Albuquerque. I love it every year, just seeing the skies filled with balloons. It's wonderful. And also, we see lots and lots of tourists, and I hope that they all really enjoy the area and get to enjoy some of the wonderful food here and the beautiful skies and the sunsets, and I hope they get out from the city and go out into the desert a little bit and just take a peek around, and I hope they enjoy their time here. Okay guys, I will see you in November, and also I'll be seeing you in tours of the back gardens and the desert cottage garden. I'm really looking forward to showing you that, and the secret garden. And then I'm going to try to get to an update on the lotion video, and also I'm going to try to do it in sign language as well, which is challenging, but I'll do my best. And I hope I'll be painting some more. And then later in the month I'll be focusing a little bit more on the back gardens as well. So everybody have a great month out there.